Alright, it's been about 24 hours since Pokémon ZA was revealed to the world, and we have a lot of questions. The biggest revolving around where and when the game will actually take place. And that's despite us 100% knowing where it's actually going to be set. Confused? Yeah, us too. Let me explain. So obviously, Pokémon ZA is going to be set in Kalos. The trailer specifically mentions the Lumios City redevelopment plan. Lumios is the capital city of Kalos. The region is indisputable. We are returning to the Kalos region of Pokémon Gen 6. However, according to a Nintendo of America tweet about the game, some very interesting wording has seemingly blown the location wide open, because it says the new ambitious game will be set entirely within Lumios City, rather than the region as a whole. That means we apparently won't be adventuring around the larger Kalos region, which, let's face it, would be an absolutely massive departure from Pokémon games of the past, which rely on discovering what a new region has to offer to pull players in. Now admittedly, Kalos wasn't perhaps the most inspired Pokémon region of the lot, featuring your standard array of cities, a desert, coastal routes, forests and grasslands. In short, everything you might expect from a Pokémon region. And the news that the region as a whole appears to be being left outside in the cold in favour of a game set entirely within one city has dampened the hype around ZA for some and absolutely killed the excitement dead for others if social media is anything to go by. So today I thought we'd leave behind the solid ground of what we actually know, which is next to nothing, and instead take a little wander into the uncharted waters of pure, unadulterated speculation. How a Pokemon game set entirely in one city might actually work really well, why it might not actually mean one city, at least as we understand it, and why it actually might not matter that much anyway. Let's start with that last one, shall we? Why might it not matter? One of the main problems a lot of people seem to have with the idea of Legends ZA taking place in just Lumios City is that it's such a large departure from Legends Arceus, which introduced an entirely new version of Sinnoh to explore in the form of Hisui. It's a Legends game, so it stands to reason that Legends ZA will play in a very similar way to Legends Arceus, right? Well, assuming that is putting quite a lot of weight behind the idea that Game Freak want all of the Legends series games to be the same. Now sure, every Pokemon mainstream game, with the exception perhaps of Sun and Moon, pretty much follows the same structure. Get a starter, catch mons, get badges, challenge Elite Four, become champion, and if you save the world on the way, more power to you. Legends Arceus obviously blew that structure out of the water with a focus on catching as many Pokemon as possible and with a barely passing glance at battle mechanics that had been a staple of the series for decades. So what if Legends ZA takes that idea and runs further from it? Maybe Legends ZA won't be a game that asks you to hunt down as many Pokemon as possible to complete a Pokédex. Maybe, with the focus being on the redevelopment of Lumios City, the focus will be more on battling, clearing out areas of difficult to handle Pokemon or mons that have somehow ended up way out of their habitat and need to be returned home. Once you accept the possibility that Legends ZA will be a complete departure again from what Legends Arceus offers and will play significantly differently, it does at least make it easier to come up with ways that a Pokemon game set entirely in one city might work. We still, after all, haven't seen any gameplay. We have no idea, really, how the game will work at all. But let's take the worst case scenario, as some might call it. Let's say, for the sake of argument, that Pokemon Legends ZA will play almost exactly the same, with your standard array of gameplay improvements and new mechanics, like Mega Evolution, let's remember, as Legends Arceus. How would a game like Legends Arceus, which is built around travelling to different biomes and catching new Pokemon across an entirely new region, play when it's confined to a singular city? Well, surprisingly, I can think of more than a few ways it might work really well. For a start off, let's not pretend that games based in one singular city can't work. We're not talking about a Lumios City the size of the one we explored in X and Y. At the very least, we'll be looking at a sprawling metropolis filled with parks, different habitats, and of course industrial locales for Pokemon to hide in. And that's assuming that one of my main theories isn't true anyway, but I'm going to get to that in a sec. Plenty of games have made a success of making a singular city seem varied and interesting. And yes, this is way off piece for Pokemon, but just look at how GTA over the course of the last couple of decades has managed to make its many locations, often within one city, feel different. And as for the idea that you can't possibly have a big old circle map with lots of different Pokemon living in it, may I remind you that Scarlet and Violet's DLC already did that with the Indigo Disc. Although I doubt that's the kind of route they'll go down, the trailer revolves around a Lumios City redevelopment plan to build a place for Pokemon and people. Maybe the game will revolve around creating these new habitats to attract different species of Pokemon to the city, thus allowing us to catch and study them. Now, like I said, I don't think that is what's going to happen, but it's easy to see how it could. So So here's what I think might happen in Z8. The Lumios City redevelopment plan suggests that city is actually in need of redeveloping. Now, what could cause a city the size of Lumios to need redevelopment? Well, being decimated in a war might do it. We know in the past Kalos has been involved in a war that almost destroyed the region. What if we're trying to redevelop the city and the area around it so that it can accommodate people and the Pokémon that have moved into the destroyed city after the war has ended? That would allow Game Freak to use different biomes for areas we have yet to redevelop, since the Pokémon that have moved into the area will have been able to establish habitats around them, like a freezing cold zone for ice types or a volcanic and burning hot area for fire types. And you can easily imagine ghost types floating around old dilapidated buildings. Maybe we'll literally be rebuilding a Lumios City that was decimated during the war ended by AZ. It allows for the gameplay loop of Legends Arceus to still be in play. We're rebuilding the city so it fits into the idea of a redevelopment plan, and by setting it just after the apparent war that Kalos suffered through, it bridges that gap between the Pokemon canon now, in X and Y, and AZ and his Floette, which surely have to play a part in the story one way or another. Now, not that I want to immediately poke holes in my own theory, but there are a few questionable details around it that I want to point out. It's tricky, for example, to see where Xerneas, Yveltal and Zygarde would fit into a story built around redeveloping a destroyed Lumios City, short of them being buried beneath it or something similar to that. And it's also questionable where Mega Evolution would fit into that idea. The Mega Evolution stones in X and Y were scattered around Kalos, not many were around Lumios. In fact, the Mega Evolution guru himself wasn't even from there, but maybe this is where Mega Evos originate from, especially after the events of the war. There is, after all, no reason this can't be an alt timeline, in which case it doesn't have to fit into the game canon as we know it at all, which is why this lack of information is a little frustrating. Obviously, ultimately, we know absolutely nothing about how Legends ZA will play or how Lumios City will work. This is, after all, one big exercise in speculation, and Pokemon have designed it to be so. But what should be clear is the idea of a Pokemon game set entirely in one massive megacity isn't just plausible, it sounds like an absolutely incredible idea if it's done right. We'll just have to wait and see what Game Freak is cooking up, but they've described it as the most ambitious Pokemon game potentially ever, so despite all the revelations that have come out so far, my hype is still through the roof. But what do you make of these theories? Am I on the right track or am I way off piste? Let me know what you're thinking and any of your own outlandish theories down in the comments. We're all friends here. And while we've got you here with us at GG Recon, YouTube should be recommending you a video by us it thinks you'll absolutely love right about now. So why not check that out here? Thanks for watching.